Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We are happy to have you here with us so that we can talk about the C-level guide to cybersecurity and cyber insurance policies for 2022. So today we are going to try to cover a few things for you. We are going to first cover what has changed in 2022 and how that will affect you and your business related to your cybersecurity insurance policies. And also we are going to cover what to expect in 2022 when applying and renewing for your cybersecurity insurance policies, and any hidden gotchas and other things that might be there that you may not know about or may have changed since last year. In addition to that, the closest thing that there is to a silver bullet in cybersecurity protections that every business should implement today or be at risk of losing your cyber insurance policy. So we are happy to have with us today our guest speaker of Alex Cagnoni, who is currently with WatchGuard. He has 24 years experience in working with cybersecurity insurance and authentication, and he is currently the he is past CTO and CEO of DataBlink, and he is currently now with WatchGuard and is basically all things multi-factor and all things off-point. He is the guy to go to. Of course, in addition to Alex, we always have with us our founder and president, Henry Overton. And we are excited to get this started for you today. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and send it over to Henry to go ahead and get it started.
Look, let me tell you a little bit about us and why we're so excited to have this opportunity to share with you. We've been doing this since 1999. We've been focusing on being accountable and not pointing fingers. And when it comes to security and cybersecurity, there is so much about that we have to help you with. We provide tech support and cybersecurity and consultation and project work for clients 24/7, 365 across the U.S. now. From 3 offices, Baton Rouge, Metairie, New Orleans, and Dallas, Texas. And kind of one of the fun things there is about 99, and I would think really it's more like 100% of our clients face real compliance and security mandates, and that's what we're here to help with. So that kind of feels like a big mission for me. But why I am so excited about who our guest is WatchGuard Technologies, or now WatchGuard, is in my humble opinion, I didn't scrape this information from their website. I'll just tell you what I've learned in 20+ years of dealing with WatchGuard. They're a global leader in IT security solutions. We have always found their solutions to be some of the highest ROI, or return on investment, for our clients. So when we put things in, customers find a real value and they get a lot of bang for their buck with that. They have continued to grow and evolve and match market needs, our customers' needs. They provide always in the beginning things like network security, firewalls, and they've evolved that into wireless security and whatnot. But over the last few years, we've seen a tremendous growth in their efforts and product knowledge and product development and endpoint security, and helping our clients with mobile and work from home solutions, and really kind of matching the security needs of the world at large. So some of the cooler things when you look at all the big stuff that they're trying to put together is WatchGuard's really evolved and given us a consolidated or a unified view of all that security data, like the issues that are happening and how things are up to date and patched or whatever across all their tools. And that's become a real asset for us and our clients. And the last thing, and we'll get rolling with this here, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage why it's a real opportunity, and it's an honor to have Alex with us here, is that they are one of the few vendors that we have worked with for decades now that I would say this about, that they've been a highly accountable and just a very reliable partner for turnkey solutions and our clients. So really excited to have them on on with us. And today's not even a product pitch, so you're gonna like that. We're just here to talk. We had the fun conversation with Alex. So like, we're just here to talk about the technology at large and the needs that you see around the world. So that's kind of where we're going today. So if you'll hang on to the end, though, I do want to leave you with a lot of really good information and some things that you can put your hands on. If you'll hang on to the end of the presentation, we're going to share with you some very valuable resources. Alex has brought us from all the experience and the knowledge that they have across the clients that they serve, which is a whole lot more than what I serve. But what they've brought together is a buyer's guide to cyber insurance. This is probably one of the most valuable assets you'll get from today's webinar. It goes into great detail about what you as a business owner or business leader need to know from kind of a global perspective and a US perspective and a much bigger perspective than just what Henry suggests. So there's that. You'll get a white paper that we put a lot of heart into about 21 questions you should ask any consultant, any IT person before giving them access to your company's network. That goes for antivirus vendors, anybody that's going to plug into anything in your environment, and that's a huge part of cybersecurity. We'll talk about it down the road. And then a recently updated, just for 2022, just the Security Essentials Resources Guide. A lot of the resources we'll cover today are in there, and a lot more. Actually, I think all of the resources that we're going to talk about today are kind of highlighted in there. And last, well, two more things, but wait, there's more. We're going to provide, if you want it, a 30 days license to our absolute favorite endpoint protection product, so that you can see what something better than antivirus does in your environment, and you can touch it and feel it, and we'll guide you through using it. So it's not just a here's the license key, have fun with that kind of deal. We're going to actually give you a little bit of time with one of our technicians to help you kind of make sure it goes in and goes in well. And at the end, we'll talk about a massive discount on turnkey solutions, proprietary cybersecurity, vulnerability, and risk analysis process, and that service offering that you can take advantage of if you stick around. So hang tight. We've got a lot of data to go through. I apologize. We're going to talk really fast here because I promised you that I would try to keep this in like 30, 45 minutes. So we're just going to blast through this. Now, Alex, you and I have talked a lot about this leading up to this, going into here. And I know we could list 57 things that are big challenges in 2022. And I appreciate you trying to stick to just the few that we itemized, but maybe this brought a little chuckle when we first started looking at the slide deck together. Some of the things that we see that are huge, and kind of one of the biggest things that has absolutely changed and changed the landscape and changed the world in 2022 is this cat on a horse. The Russian government's attack on Ukraine has, for a lot of analysts' perspectives, what's happened there is that the Russian government has launched a massive retool and an upgrade to their cyber attacks, and they're doing it both for espionage, actual warfare, and for paying for the war. They're making money off of the ransoms that they're getting from companies and countries and governments as they pay those. So it's really been helpful. You brought this one to me, Alex. Do you use Vodafone for your cell phone?
Yep. Yeah, I use it. I use it, right. And I was out for 3 days.
Yeah, 3 days with no cell phone. I think I would probably either go into shock, or maybe I'd be a better person at the end of that.
Yeah,
but that was definitely linked to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, myself without the cell phone for 3 days. Okay, it's probably fine. The problem is all the services that were off because of this attack. Because this was in Portugal, and most of the health system is connected to Vodafone. And the number that you would call to communicate if you had an emergency, if you had COVID, you need an ambulance. A lot of services were down because of this attack. So it really hit hard Vodafone and critical infrastructure here in Portugal.
Yeah. Now, they didn't stop there. This is the same Russian group, by the way, that the cybersecurity experts have been able to track these guys. They've moved on to the whole country of Costa Rica. There's this group, this hacker group that I think for lack of a definite name, they're calling it Conti. But they have this one Russian group has expressly reached out and attempted to overthrow the government of Costa Rica. That's different from stealing a couple bucks from somebody because they encrypted their QuickBooks. These guys are changing the global landscape of government, or attempting to, and I don't think it can be understated how important the aggression of the Russian government and their cyber warfare arm has become. Second big thing that we're seeing that I would like to point out that we see here in America, and certainly Alex, I think you're seeing it globally, is that there are more and more politicians, senators, congressmen, and even our president and governors who are very aware of this now and are starting to pass laws about this. In January, there was a lot of talk about it happening, and in March, it actually happened. The American Cybersecurity Act got massively strengthened, and what that means is that the implications for business owners here in the U.S. is that we have real laws that we have to comply with that affect what happens if we have a cyber attack, how we prepare for cyber attacks, and whatnot. So whether or not you're aware of it, that's a reality. Alex, what are you seeing globally across from wherever WatchGuard and you interact?
Yeah, it's a huge growth in especially in ransomware attacks. So it's really complicated when you talk about, okay, how you not how you can prevent. Once it happens, what do you do about that? That's why cyber insurance policies or companies requiring or asking for policies is growing so fast. That's why we see this growth. We saw this growth last year, starting in US and Canada, now expanding even to Europe, growing so fast because of ransomware attacks. CISA, for example, in September last year, together with the FBI, they launched an advisory about, you mentioned the Conti gang. So there's the Conti ransomware. They said that most of the times the Conti gang will connect using an RDP and use this RDP connection to Windows Server to distribute ransomware. So there's a lot of recommendations, and the government started working not only trying to see ways that the companies could avoid those ransomwares, but best practices, things that you could do to be aware, that you have to be aware so you can protect yourself against this kind of attack. Because once it hits you, it's really tough decision to make. Yeah,
definitely. Now, you mentioned CISA in passing, and I'll pull this up on the screen. This is CISA.gov. Is the specific resource, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And if you've never heard of them, now's the time to get familiar with them, because this American Cybersecurity Act, it goes on to define that a lot of the definitions and how things will be classified, and if you have an incident that meets certain thresholds in the law, will be set by CISA's standards and by CISA's regulations. CISA's a friendly, by and large. They're a great resource. They have some phenomenal resources in there. We're actually going to talk about a few of them down the road throughout the rest of this presentation. So definitely, it's a great nugget, Alex. Now, kind of a third thing that we at Turnkey Solutions are seeing is that we're pushing a lot of security tools into our clients' environments. And the world at large, all the cybersecurity auditing organizations and vendors are saying, look, really there may be a point at which there's no perfect defense. Here was an article from Beta News just a few months ago, around December or January, that cyber criminals can penetrate 93% of company networks, 93%, if they want to. So that the reality is that it's just not possible to have a perfect defense. It is not possible really to spend enough money to be completely immune to hackers. If you want to think even worse, or the reality is that now these hacking groups have made so much money over the last 3, 4, 5 years just in kind of the basic scripts and kind of the manually driven attacks. This one group, the Conti group, made $182 million in ransomware in 2021. That now they are investing in machine learning and artificial intelligence. They're hiring kids straight out of Harvard and the big tech schools. They're hiring people for good paying jobs, offering them healthcare benefits. What we're seeing now, according to this article in the Protocol magazine, just again a few weeks ago, they're starting to hire machine learning and artificial intelligence experts to automate their campaigns. So when artificial intelligence and machine learning can look at your particular setup and what you have in your environment, and they can crank through and find the one little hole left in your network. When they can do that thousands of times faster than the humans can, it's a different game, and that's happening as we speak. So now I promised y'all 4 things that have changed in 2022, and I'm gonna leave it with Alex for a minute, because when we were talking about this, you came up with like another 94. What else do you see going on here, Alex? What's changed?
So I think you mentioned it right. I mean, the government is doing their job, CISA, and we're seeing more and more recommendations coming from the government on how to, on best practices, or things that you have to do. Now, not only that, but also even the vendors, the regular companies, they're seeing, well, information, it's really important, and we need to help protect this information. How we protect this information? So Multi Factor Authentication, for example, which is my area of expertise for almost 25 years, is something that today you cannot just think it as something optional. I just came from a Gartner summit last week in the UK, and one of the first things they say is that MFA is not optional. You have to implement. That's why we're starting to see some vendors doing things like Salesforce, for example. They created this mandate about using MFA since February 1st, and they will be auto-enabling MFA for users. So identity is becoming really, really important. When you mentioned that attackers could penetrate, if I'm not mistaken, 93% of the companies. A lot of those attacks, they start with the remote access, a VPN, using a stolen credential, using phishing, using some kind of social engineering with the users. So that's why the MFA has become so important for the companies to be implementing. And even privacy laws. Sometimes we think about privacy regulations, not too much related to security, but if you see, for example, in Europe with the GDPR, we had this hospital just recently, I think it was at the end of last year, they were fined for about 400,000 euros for not properly protecting their records. They were not using MFA to protect their records. The same thing that you have in US for a long time, HIPAA, that mandates the use of MFA to protect the patient records, because this is really confidential information. We're seeing now being covered by privacy regulations as well. So more and more you're going to see, if it's not in the hospital area, it's in the privacy area. We're going to see that. Cyber insurance, for sure. I mean, it's a big one. They're really concerned. They're concerned about your security. And again, if you eat too much, you don't take care of your health, you had a heart attack, you don't do anything good for your health, you're not going to get a life insurance. They're going to say, okay, it's too risky for me. The same thing they're going to do for cyber insurance. And they want to make sure that you're doing the right things, and they want to make sure you have the right things implemented before they can grant you a policy. So I heard a lot about last year companies were receiving notifications from insurers saying that they were going to give a big increase in the policies, the insurance policies, or even refuse to renew the policy if you wouldn't have some measures in place like multi-factor authentication. Now, remote work, hybrid, now that we know that we don't have any new normal, it's just the world is changing. I mean, it's almost 2 years with COVID and people working from home. We expected to go back and then we're off again. Applications moving to the cloud. So there's so many things. So the world became hybrid. For example, this background here, it's the office, one of our offices that was remodeled just before COVID. And it's like that until today, because we don't have a lot of people going to the office. The world is hybrid, so we have to be prepared for that. And zero trust, for example, it's one of the concepts or the models that most of the companies are looking for. It's critical. It's not easy. You have to have the right controls in place. It's something that you have to identify which applications you need to protect. But it's really crucial to start thinking. It doesn't matter what is the size of your company. It can be a small size, big size. It doesn't matter. I think the beauty of the zero trust model is that it can be implemented in companies of every size. You just have to identify what are the applications that are critical, identify who has access to those applications, the computers that have access to those applications, have the access controls in place, and monitor. Because again, zero trust is something that you can gain, but it's not perpetual. You have to continuously monitor to maintain the trust. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing for this year. More and more vendors and government mandates or recommendations, cyber insurance for sure, and remote work and zero trust zero trust needs to be implemented. At least some of its concept, I think, is really valuable for companies of every size.
Alex, zero trust is kind of a new term in a lot of environments. We're bringing that up with our customers these days. But in case somebody hasn't heard about it, what do you mean by zero trust?
Yeah, zero trust is a model. It's not new. It's actually more than 10 years old. It was created by an analyst, I think, from Forrester Research, but it became really popular with the COVID because the principle of zero trust is that you cannot trust. You don't have networks like we had in the past, that you had a firewall and now the company was behind the firewall and that's it. It doesn't exist anymore. People are everywhere. And the concept of zero trust was that you should never trust, always verify. So this was the main phrase. If you need to think about zero trust, never trust, always verify. So people are everywhere, applications are everywhere, the network has been broken. Even the internal network, it's not something that you can just say it's trusted. If someone can get inside, they can use lateral movements to get into servers or other applications. And by the way, this fine that the hospital in the Netherlands received was because they didn't have MFA inside the network. They considered inside the network secure enough. They were using MFA externally, but not internally. And GDPR said, no, you have, how can you trust whoever is inside the network? No, you have to implement MFA. So zero trust, it's a model that's about creating trust, rethinking the network in terms of applications, microsegments, or applications like CRM, like your email, like your server, your file server, file sharing applications, and who has access to that or who should have access to that. Rethink and make sure it's protected the right way.
Yeah, it's actually what we're experiencing is that implementing and enabling a zero trust environment is something that's not complicated. It can be done with the tools. It's completely possible to do. It's a different set of tools than what we saw commonly. out there 4, 5, 6 years ago. But if I could, just to kind of underscore what you're saying here, is that the firewall, although an important part of a corporate environment, is just not enough. And antivirus that scans for known viruses is just not enough anymore.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, because you can have a firewall controlling access to the network, but like the pipeline attack, there was a firewall, but the attacker used the credential that they found in the dark web, that nobody was monitoring that, so they used this credential connected through the VPN, they passed through the firewall. So because the firewall at this moment, it was just doing the VPN. So that's why you need other tools to make sure you have the right security.
I think I saw the other day that Colonial Pipeline got fined, or they're facing a fine the government's trying to put on them of right at $1 million for being improperly prepared for the event that really shut down a lot of America transportation and fuel production. So all right. Well, I know we could go on forever on this. Literally, I mean, it's sad. There's so many really cool solutions to these problems that we don't have time to cover here today. And it's not so much about the technical tool. It's the, hopefully business owners, business leaders, IT directors are paying attention to the fact that the bigger idea here is that this is a different game than it was in December of 2021, than it was in 2019. The practices and the approaches that you're taking should match the world that has just evolved, just right underneath our own eyes. Now, you mentioned cyber insurance and that they're becoming way more concerned. And we promised in the invite to the webinar that we would talk a little bit about that. So kind of digging into that concept, a lot of our customers bring us their cybersecurity insurance underwriting applications. If you're a customer and you're on the call, or if you're not, bring them to me if you want kind of an impartial perspective on this. But I ask my customers, please let me see your policy declaration page so I can help you answer truthfully the answers to those things. But what we're seeing is that and we've seen a ton of applications over the last year. And across the board, we're seeing at a very minimum, I did see one that was as low as a 5% increase. We're seeing some that went up more than 40% over last year. And it all depends on a ton of variables that the insurance company looks at. Some of those variables are that survey. The questions are just getting tougher. And here's some screenshots that we got from actual applications. Some of the questions are like, do you use 2FA, two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication? And not to be too obvious about it, but there's a reason I wanted you, Alex, on this webinar when we're talking about MFA, is because this is in cybersecurity insurance underwriting, because this is usually one of the first technical questions on that audit. They talk a lot about policies and whatnot that are important, but when they start tech, they usually start with the question of, do you have MFA on your systems? And it's gotten worse. The questionnaires then go into things, and again, these are screenshots of the questionnaires, and we don't have time to dig into it, but if you've gone through an application, you know that these questionnaires are big and gross and long. And I'll share one with you that I got the opportunity to look at just a few days ago. This was on, I think it was like page 69 of like 74, 75 pages. To say that it was buried in the fine print is an understatement. But this application specifically says, if you, this is not me making this up, this is a screenshot of one of my customers' cybersecurity insurance underwriting. If no multi-factor authentication for remote access equals no renewal terms, all right, it doesn't get a whole lot plainer than that. Also, your inability to recover all business critical data and systems within 10 days could affect availability of business income coverage. In other words, they're saying we might give you a little bit of coverage for the loss of income, but not if you don't have a good backup plan in place. and backup and recovery plan. And if you can't get your data back up in a reasonable time, don't expect us to cover you for forever. And process controls and just a ton of stuff. And I didn't want to walk through the whole 74-page application with y'all, but to say that it's the application has changed is kind of an understatement. Alex, you sent me an application, a couple screenshots, and you know, I've blown up the fine print on one of those that you sent me, but I found this phrase in that one application really poignant. Coverage depends on the facts and circumstances involved in the claim or loss, also applicable policy provisions and any applicable law. Now, if that's not an open-ended gotcha, I don't know what it is. There's saying that any applicable law, which we just looked at, we saw the government in the United States is changing the laws on a rapid basis. So those laws are shifting rapidly. And I would, you know, from our experience, I would just caution everybody to please read the fine print and specifically look for things that are, look for clauses about what happens if there's a terrorist attack. How do they define terrorist attack? Because a lot of these cyber attacks are becoming labeled or classified by the government as terrorist attacks. And a lot of your insurance policies say, we won't cover you. There's no payout in the event of a terrorist attack. So read the fine print. I started this slide with like 3 gotchas from, you know, stuff that we've looked at over the years, but it ballooned and it got more and more and more, and it just becomes impossible to identify it all here. So please watch for the fine print when you're walking through this. Now, Alex, you sent me something, and we've already talked a little bit about CISA. The cybersecurity insurance underwriting companies, the Lloyd's of London, the Hartfords, all the big companies that write insurance in America, they have insurance people on staff, right? But where are they getting their advice on you know, what questions to ask their customers? Where are they getting their advice for, like, how should we define good protections or not? And how would we know if this company is an insurable risk? Well, they're getting it straight from CISA. And you brought this up to me. Now, specifically, what was this alert? Because it just came through 2 days ago, Alex, this alert from CISA, and they have a great alerting system of updates. But what happened here, and why did this catch your eyes?
I think the most interesting thing about the first thing is that it wasn't just developed by CISA, it was actually developed by them together with other cybersecurity authorities in US, Canada, New Zealand, the Netherlands, and UK. So it was something done in conjunction to really try to make people understand, make companies understand what are the main security controls that you have to look. I mean, if you're completely confused about, okay, how do I protect? What's going on with this, the market now? How do I protect myself? I think the good thing about this document is that it gives like some very easy to read guidance. It's not like a complex document. Anyone can read it and understand. It talks about a Multi Factor Authentication, which is a requirement. You cannot do, if you don't have MFA for remote access or VPN, it's completely wrong. Password policies, even people talking about passwordless authentication. This is something we might see in the future, but we're not there yet, and passwords are not going away. Endpoint security, that you need to protect your computer. Even if I authenticate through a VPN and connect to a service, if my computer is infected and it can distribute this ransomware into other computers, then you have a problem. So it gives you a lot of things that you should do, a lot of recommendations, and I think it works really well in terms of get it printed, put in your wall to take a look.
Yeah.
What are the things that you should be looking for? And now you have to trust on that and trust on a company that can help you with this service. help you understand how to better implement those recommendations. But I think it was great because now it's not something that you could say, oh, it's only the CISA and US that are working. No, it's several countries that are working together for the cybersecurity and for better cyber protection against those terrorist attacks, like you mentioned, like those Coney gangs with the war that we're seeing, those attacks that will try to take down critical infrastructures will happen more and more. So I think it helps a lot companies, not only in US, but in other countries, to understand what are the main measures you should put in place to protect your company.
Right. So realistically, I read through the guide, and I'm a big follower of CISA. And I think what I picked up from there is that there's a ton of stuff in there. It's not super overly technical, but I think from two perspectives, it's an incredibly valuable resource for everybody on the webinar here. Is one, if you're a business owner and you don't think you're a very technical person, take the list, print it out, and bring it to your technical resource and say, look, this is multiple governments, specifically the United States government, but this is many governments have all agreed on this is what we ought to be doing. So are we doing this? Where are we at on this list? As a business owner, you can have a conversation guide that empowers you to be informed, even if you're not a technical expert. Now, from an IT perspective, we hear a lot from IT directors that we work with that, look, I'm just not getting buy-in from corporate on X, Y, and Z things, even though I think it's a big one. Corporate, the C-level or whatever isn't agreeing with me. This should be a resource that you bring to them. We're not here to sell on, this is Henry's recommendation or this is Alex's recommendation. We're here to say, look, this is what the world experts are agreeing on. This is what our cybersecurity insurance underwriting company is going to ask us, are we doing? And this is what the government is going to expect us to be doing, even if they're not mandating some of it just yet, but it's coming, and it will happen to where these things are more regulated down, all the way down to small business. So please use that resource. It will be included in the guide. Now, I told you I would recommend, I would try to summarize that to 3. And there's a lot in there. There's specifically 18 or 19 steps that they've got in there, and they've got about 174 questions that your technical resource will walk through with you at CISA. But where do I start? There's 3 things that I think we've hit too many times in today's conversation to just not say, okay, we just have to start doing this. One is MFA, Multi Factor Authentication, something like that for everything that can access your network. Now, I used to say everything that can access your network remotely. However, the world has changed, and now hackers are living inside of networks for 6 months to a year before they strike. And if you have multi-factor authentication on every workstation, every server, then the hackers can be inside your network and not have as much freedom to spread and move across the network. So everything that can access your network, if it's possible to put MFA on it, you need to do it. We do it turnkey. I don't know, Alex, is that too strong of a stand?
No, you're completely right. I mean, and multi-factor authentication, it's going to be required, and you just showed a big list there. They're going to check if you protect your email, if you protect remote access to servers, access to confidential data or privileged data. So you're completely right.
All right. The next is replacing your old school antivirus with endpoint detection and response. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on that section in the cybersecurity insurance underwriting requirements, but without fail, 100% of the applications that we've seen come across our desk where customers are saying, hey, can you help me read through this and see where we're at? they're specifically saying, and they're using that term, what endpoint detection and response product are you using? They may have in another question, what antivirus product are you using? But they're either expecting your antivirus product to be both antivirus and endpoint detection and response, or for you to have both products side by side. Again, we don't have to talk specific technical and whatnot, but you need to have that talk with whoever's taking care of your IT or whoever is in decision-making points of your company, that this is something that we have to do. And the third is implement a risk assessment process. This is a CISA recommendation, the National Institute of Standards and Technology recommendation. And the reality is if you think about it, there's no way you can know how many licenses of things you got to put these tools on or what you need to secure until you've done an assessment. Now, the CISA process has 4 steps for doing a risk assessment process or a risk management process. This is a copy paste from a paper they wrote, that CISA wrote on how to do risk management process properly. First is, and I'm summarizing like 9 pages of the document by just saying identify, but you identify your assets, your resources, your things, your places, your people, everything that could be a point of entry or could be a point of value, and a few more points there. So first you identify it. Next is you spend some time with the right tools and processes and people analyzing risk and assigning the disposition. Like how big of a risk is this? How urgent of a risk is this? So you think through, what would happen if X, Y, and Z took place on this asset that we identified here in step 1. Next, you put in controls to address those risks. So if you say, look, it's a possibility that here in Louisiana, we could have a hurricane and it could, suck the server right out of the closet and drop it in the Gulf of Mexico, then okay, the control for that is that we're going to put a backup system in place that sends the backup off-site. Same concept. And then the next and 4th step, I didn't say final, but it's the 4th step, is to monitor and improve. So you look at those controls and you put in the backup and you don't set it and forget it. You look back and you read the reports and you ask the IT people, how well did our recovery go? How quickly can we restore? How quickly can things get back up in business if we have issues? And if you notice it, it goes straight back into identifying. This is where I talk about it being a process, because you have to get into the habit of saying, okay, we did this before. We monitored and improved. Now, what has changed? Anyway, short version is it's a process and you need to put it into place. So MFA for everything, endpoint detection and response, and please put in a process and build a culture in your environment of risk assessment. Now, all that said, I understand it's a lot that we threw out there and there's a ton of information that we poured out. Where do you start? What I would like to offer out there, we can help you with this. There is the option to go through that all yourself, and it's certainly possible. We know a lot of organizations that do, but we have a proprietary cybersecurity risk assessment analysis process and project plan that we do all the time for our clients, that starts with building a comprehensive list of your assets. We look at where there is inadequate data compliance and cybersecurity protections, i.e., if you're an organization that should be bound by HIPAA, we look at we have an ability to see where is your security for your data sets in compliance with HIPAA. We can find where there's sensitive information unprotected on your computers and in Google Cloud, on OneDrive, in SharePoint, on your email. You would be mortified to see how many people put sensitive information kind of unwittingly in places that get replicated out to the cloud, transmitted through the cloud in unsecured manner. We're going to look for glitches and things that could cause you problems, and we're going to look at where you're spending money. And look, if you have an IT department, we want to work with them on this if at all possible, because they can make this process go better. Why should you have this done with Turnkey? And this is just a frank testimonial from one of our clients. She said she didn't realize they were lacking. until they hired us. Her main concern was knowing that their sensitive information would be heavily protected. And she now has peace of mind since bringing Turnkey Solutions on board. The entire team is very knowledgeable, but also very patient. We appreciate that. So that whole conversation with her started with the assessment. At the end of this assessment, this is where it gets fun, you're going to either love our plan and want to do it yourself. You're going to love the plan and want me to help you with it. So we're ready for that. Or third, and this is a real offer. I'll put this out there, and I put this out there all the time. Is that you think I completely wasted your time? Because I'm going to need a little bit of your time to walk through this, and I refund any money you spent, and I donate $200 to the charity of your choice. Simple enough, right? Worst case scenario, you get an independent third-party audit of your systems and $200 to St. Jude or whomever you want to name. So how to get started with that, and we're wrapping up here, and we're going to get to Q&A in just a second. It's $14.95. Before you pay, we start with a consult. Here's how to get in touch with us, but hang tight. If you will call us and set this up before June 1, per this webinar, I'm going to make you a special offer that for the first 4 people that call and request, we're going to do this at $0. There's a lot of work that goes into this. I don't entertain this lightly, but we're glad to make this offer for the first 4 qualified people who ask for it. And this is how you do it. You go to you call us at 224-6595, or you go to the website turnkeysol.com/cyber audit, or you email us ask@turnkeysol.com. Now, if you're not ready for an audit, but you just want some more informational resources, I would suggest you just email us, ask@tcas.la, and we're going to set you up with those 4 resources that we talked about at the beginning. How to secure your network and ask the 21 questions that you should ask anybody before you give them access. The WatchGuard report on the cybersecurity insurance buyer's guide that Alex brought to us today, and the Cybersecurity Essentials resource guide that includes links to all the sites that we referenced today, and 30 days free license of WatchGuard's product, endpoint detection and response, that quite frankly we've had great success with. I'll give you a 30-day free license of it. So just ask@tcas.la. That's how you get a hold of that. And I'm done. And we're under an hour. I'm proud of that. So this is a spot where if you have questions, look at the little thing down at the bottom where it says Q&A. If you have questions, or if you got a question, put it in there. You have one of the world's leading experts on multi-factor authentication here. We're glad to answer your questions. Now's a great opportunity. Or if you want to think about it for a minute, you email us ask@tcas.la, and we will be glad to get them answered for you. We can forward them on to Alex and get back to you. Now, don't forget, we'll leave this out there while anybody's thinking of questions. Alex, I'll just kind of leave it here. We really appreciate you joining us today. We really appreciate your wisdom and your advice, and certainly WatchGuard's partnership for our clients. Do you have any kind of final thoughts that you would throw out there for folks?
Oh, it was a pleasure. I mean, I think it's a great information, great updated information, really valuable data. I think it was amazing. It was my pleasure to be part of that, really. And thanks for the great guide in authentication. I've been working for 25 years only. I know something about authentication. I'm not the big expert, but I know a thing or two.
You've been here since the early days of what we now call MFA. So
I mean, a couple of years before Turnkey started, I saw it was 99. I think I started with MFA in 97 when tokens were used for remote access using dial-up connections. So
wow, that's been a minute.
Yeah, that's old.
It's been a while.
I'm giving up my age. So
don't talk to me about that. I'm feeling you too. Well, look, if we don't have any questions, we really sincerely appreciate y'all. We appreciate you joining and taking some time. I would encourage you to please ask us your questions afterwards. Reach out and get those resources by just emailing ask@tks.la, and we'll get them right over to you. And we appreciate your partnership for those clients that are on the call. And we appreciate the opportunity to be of value and be a good resource for everybody. And again, Alex, can't say enough. I really appreciate your contribution, your experience, and taking time out to meet with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you all. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again.